Welcome to EtherLink AI Insights, the podcast where we break down the most pressing challenges facing enterprises today. I'm Alex, and I'm joined as always by Sam. Today we're tackling something that's keeping a lot of European business leaders up at night: AI Agentic Governance Readiness for European enterprises. Sam, this feels urgent right now. Why should our listeners care about agentic governance specifically?
Great question, Alex. Here's the reality. 72% of European organizations are already running generative AI in their operations, but only 28% have actual governance frameworks in place. That's a massive gap. And now we're talking about agentic systems, AI that doesn't just answer questions, but actively makes decisions and takes actions. That's a completely different risk profile.
So we're moving beyond GPT-style tools into autonomous agents that can actually execute business processes independently. That's the jump happening right now, especially in places like Oulu and across the Nordic region. Sam, what's the core risk people are missing here?
The governance paradox, really. The more autonomous and capable your agent becomes, the more oversight and control you actually need. But a lot of enterprises are approaching this backwards. They're building the agent first and thinking about governance later. With the EU AI Act now in enforcement phase, that's no longer an option. Agentic systems are classified as high risk, and regulators are watching.
Let's dig into what the EU AI Act actually requires. What are companies legally obligated to do when deploying autonomous agents in, say, customer support or marketing?
There are 5 key mandates. First, transparency. Customers need to know when they're interacting with an autonomous system, not a human. Second, human oversight. Documented controls where humans can intervene on important decisions. Third, data governance. Lawful data processing with proper consent. Fourth, bias monitoring, ongoing testing for discriminatory outcomes. And fifth, detailed documentation for audits. Miss any of these and you're exposed. And
that's substantial. Forrester reported that 61% of European enterprises cite regulatory uncertainty as their main blocker for scaling AI. So governance readiness isn't optional. It's the gating factor for actually using these systems at scale. How do organizations assess where they stand?
Readiness isn't a checkbox. It's a maturity spectrum. Think of it across 5 dimensions. First is strategy and risk ownership. You need a designated person, typically an AI lead architect, who owns the risk conversation. They translate what the business wants into something that's actually compliant and operationalized.
That role sounds critical, but also relatively new in most organizations. What does an AI lead architect actually do day to day?
They're the bridge between the C-suite and the engineering team. On one side, you have executives with business objectives and risk appetite. On the other side, you have engineers building systems. The AI lead architect makes sure those two worlds actually align. They set governance policies, establish risk frameworks, and ensure board-level visibility. Without that role, you get disconnection, and that's where compliance gaps emerge.
Gotcha. So that's dimension 1. What about the second pillar of readiness?
Data governance and privacy by design. Agentic systems eat data. A marketing automation agent needs behavioral data, sales agents need prospect data, support agents need conversation history. Each of those integrations triggers privacy obligations under GDPR and DPIA requirements. You need a complete inventory of what data flows where, explicit consent management, and third-party vendor assessments.
That's practical and detailed. So before you even deploy the agent, you're doing data impact assessments. What's the third dimension?
Transparency and explainability. This is where you document how the agent makes decisions. Why did it decline a customer? Why was that lead routed there? You need to be able to explain the reasoning, not just say, the algorithm decided. This matters both for compliance and for customer trust. If your agent makes a decision that affects someone, they have a right to understand why.
That ties directly to the EU AI Act's transparency requirements. What about dimensions 4 and 5?
4 is testing and bias monitoring. You need continuous testing across protected categories: gender, age, ethnicity, and others, to catch discriminatory outcomes before they cause real harm. And 5 is audit readiness, documentation systems that allow regulators or auditors to actually verify compliance, not aspirational governance, documented, verifiable processes.
I want to zoom out for a second. You've outlined a pretty rigorous framework. How realistic is this for a mid-sized Nordic enterprise that's excited about agentic AI but hasn't invested heavily in governance yet?
It's absolutely realistic if they approach it methodically. The key is not to treat it as a big bang transformation. Start with the highest risk agent deployment, maybe customer support automation, and build the governance muscle there. Document the process, audit it, and then apply those lessons to the next deployment. By the third agent, you've got institutional knowledge and repeatable processes.
So it's iterative, not a complete overhaul before day one. That makes sense. But what happens if a company ignores this and just ships an autonomous agent without governance?
Short term, maybe nothing. But the risks compound. Regulatory scrutiny is increasing. Enforcement actions are coming. You expose yourself to audit failures, delays in deployments, and reputational damage if something goes wrong. Plus, you're leaving money on the table. Companies with mature governance frameworks actually deploy faster and with more confidence because they understand their risk.
That's the insight. Good governance actually accelerates deployment, not the other way around. Sam, what's the one action an enterprise should take this week to move toward readiness?
Identify your highest value agentic use case, the one that would deliver the most business impact if it worked well. Then conduct a governance readiness assessment against those 5 dimensions we discussed. Don't try to boil the ocean. Just map where you stand on strategy ownership, data governance, transparency, bias testing, and audit readiness. That gives you a baseline and a roadmap.
Clear, actionable, and specific. Listeners, this is the kind of framework thinking that separates organizations that successfully deploy agentic AI from those that stumble into regulatory trouble. For the full breakdown of governance frameworks, compliance strategies, and maturity assessment best practices, head to etherlink.ai and find the complete article on AI Agentic Governance Readiness for European enterprises. Sam, thanks for walking through this with such clarity.
Pleasure, Alex. This is one of those moments where enterprises really do have a choice. Lead with governance and move fast, or play catch-up later. The EU AI Act is real, the opportunity is real, and the window to get ahead of this is open right now.
Thanks to everyone listening to EtherLink AI Insights. We'll be back next week with another deep dive into enterprise AI strategy. Until then, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep building responsibly.